Welcome to Reddit Aliens. What was the most gruesome thing you've seen at your school? Not safe for work? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Saw a kid die from cardiac arrest at a wrestling practice. I was in 6th grade. He was a 7th grader. We were doing a takedown drill. Him and his partner were right next to me. He got taken down and stopped breathing, turned purple. They rushed us out of the gym. Apparently he had a hole in his heart and the doctors warned him not to do sports. Rest in peace. Witnessed the end of a girl being jumped by about 6 other girls in high school. Don't know what exactly they cut her face with, but they tried to cut her eye out and did a pretty close job. Sadly, she went blind in that eye. That was sophomore year, and she graduated with us as the second highest GPA. The amount of blood that was there and the eye almost hanging out of her skull was just wild to see. At my high school, there were 2 kids, twins, who had, I believe, cerebral palsy, mild to moderate cases. They weren't intellectually disabled, but they had trouble communicating sometimes as they both spoke with a pronounced stutter. Sweetest kids, super bubbly, always had a kind word to say to everyone, always smiling, whip smart, the kind of students who couldn't go for a class change without having a friendly conversation with someone in the hallway. I remember they both really were into bugs, and their final projects in science classes would always involve entomology in some way, just utter delights. Some dipshit in our freshman year decided that it would be funny to make a fake Facebook page for one of the kids and make a bunch of vile posts about them being sadomasochistic sexual deviants, posting long lists about their kinks and experiences, and that they would pay people to have sex with them in the bathrooms between classes. Sociopathic shit. For some reason, this dipshit thought it would be a smart move to brag about making this to a couple of his friends, who were also shitheads, but had enough moral sense to realize that this was a special kind of effed up. A kid who always a bit on the tough side got in fights, had a bit of a loudmouth, but was ultimately a good person, confronted shithead during class change one day. He had taken a glue stick, very hard plastic, from his locker, and in the middle of telling shithead off, he jammed it underneath this kid's jaw as hard as he could, effing shattered it, knocked a couple of teeth out, blood, mouth, tissue, and a small piece of shithead's tongue splattered against the floor in the lockers. His screams could be heard throughout the entire wing. I didn't see shithead in school after that, but the kid who hit him came back after a 2-week suspension and was a hero till graduation. Shithead actually turned out alright, believe it or not. Got sent to some crazy harsh military school that straightened him out. Last I heard, he was a scuba instructor in Bermuda or something. He seems really happy. A kid tripped during cross-country practice and broke his arm. And by broke, I mean broke. About the third of the way down the forearm, it was bent 45 degrees. When he got up, it was flopping like a dead fish. Wasn't any blood, and the kid wasn't screaming either. According to him, he couldn't feel a thing. The juxtaposition of such an obvious bad injury with the kid casually laughing like, "Wow, my arm looks weird," was profoundly unsettling. Glad the kid took it like a champ. You know how tough those cross-country guys can be. I was one, I could say. A guy in woodshop class turned up a lathe at too high a setting, had some boards glued together, I think, and wanted to make a bat or something. He revved it up and applied a chisel or something during the process. The wood blew apart and it gouged out one of his eyes, blood everywhere. When I was in middle school, I went to a school that took in kids from various economic backgrounds. There was this kid who had been part of the particular friend group for quite some time. I think since elementary, but in middle school they decided to give him the nickname PK, short for poor kid. As you can imagine, he was not a fan. We'll call him Eric, but I'm not sure what his name actually was. I was not really around for all of this, as I was not in this group, but I was friends with some people in it, so I had been getting live updates. There was one kid who was the one that had created the nickname and made sure it was catching on. His name was maybe Sean. Sean and Eric had been very good friends until all this started happening. Basically, Sean would call Eric PK in all their interactions, and Eric would ask him not to. I was there when this happened once or twice. I was sitting a table over from this group one day, and I hear a scream. I look over and see Eric sitting across from Sean. Eric had a fork in his hand and had stabbed Sean's hand with it while sitting palm down on the table. Apparently, Sean had called Eric PK one too many times, and Eric had decided since words weren't working, he would just stab him with his fork. It went almost all the way through his hand, and a teacher walked him out of the cafeteria with the fork still in his hand. If you're out there, Eric, good job. I watched two girls fight, and one grabbed the other by the back of her head and ran her face along the concrete sidewalk. It happened so fast and was over before anyone could break it up. Needless to say, the girl with the pavement facial lost the fight. Kid, his neck broke in a wrestling match by a dude slamming him in a full Nelson circa 2006, before phone cameras and such, thankfully. His poor parents. A kid grabs some fries from another kid's tray during lunch. Other kid leaps up, grabs him, and bangs his head into a metal railing until it's bleeding. Also, in the parking lot, a kid I barely knew pulled me aside and popped his trunk open. Inside were several AK-47s. Not gruesome, but pretty surprising for the time. This was 1995.
So, did you go to high school or to prison? Because both of those examples sound like, I don't know. Anyway.
Our female gym teacher was a tough lady, built similarly to WWE's China, if that helps paint a picture. Anyhow, kind of a rough school district in the city, and the gym teacher had just gotten this effing rough-ass girl suspended for fighting. Upon rough-ass girl returning to school, word was she was going to attack the gym teacher, and well, she did. Only this rough-ass girl, she had stitches in her face from the previous fight, and the gym teacher went right for the stitches. She grabbed them by the handful and just ripped the stitches right out of the girl's face, right there in gym class, in self-defense. Our star basketball player died on the court during an afternoon practice. He had an undiagnosed heart condition, and that was that. The rest of his players were shuffled into the other gymnasium as a coach grabbed a defibrillator, but at that point it was too late. It was a very sad and surreal experience. During 4th grade, my elementary school had a tall, rusted fence that blocked the schoolyard from the outside, and some kid tried to climb it to get a ball back. He slipped on top, and his arm got stuck by the top of the railing, perforating his arm and cutting it deep almost from wrist to elbow. He collapsed from shock and loss of blood, still stuck to the railing. Fortunately, the fire department got there in less than 15 minutes, and they got the kid out of it, saving him. He has this huge scar in his arm, but is still alive, well, and moves his arm well. To this day, I can't shake that image out of my mind. Oof. My high school had 3 balconies on the 2nd floor. Walking between classes, you could see the mass of students moving below. There were massive skylights above, so I assume this was designed to allow natural light into the ground floor. One day, someone thought it would be hilarious to toss an unopened can of soda over the balcony. People start yelling, "Duck!" And a kid looked up just in time to have the can land right on his eye socket. He lost that eye. Second would probably be the kid who ended up at the bottom of the pile in football practice and came off the field screaming, and his thumb was in the middle of his palm. Ugh. Middle school. Go to the bathroom during class, hear yelling inside, go inside to find one of the big bads of the school grab a dude at the back of his head and repeatedly slam his face into the sink counter. Blood was flying everywhere. Ran to tell a teacher. Dude got suspended for 2 weeks. The one getting beaten never came back to school as far as I know. In primary school, aged 8 to 9ish, we'd quite often have those safety scissors with the rounded tips but still metal for different crafts and tasks. I remember one time when the teacher had an emergency and had to leave the classroom. The class clown decided this moment was the ideal time to run around the room with the said scissors in hand. He tripped, fell forward. Another child, and the scissors went into the back of the other child's hand, removing a good square inch of flesh to the bone and showering the table in blood. I remember the substitute teacher almost passing out when she got into the classroom. There's a reason they say don't run with scissors. About 12 at a swimming lesson, someone decided to show off by jumping off a board. With his Speedo goggles on, hit the water, started screaming as one of his eyes had been sucked into the goggle. Jeez, a very short lesson. Not sure if he lost it or not. They sprayed for insects during the winter break, so when we came back to school, half-dead roaches started crawling out and fully covered the bottom basement floor where still a lot of classes were held. Some guys played football with them. I had to do some presentation and couldn't stop staring at one twitching his legs in the back where the chalk was. I had to stop and ask someone to please remove it, but they were all over the place. It was bad. Ugh. Walked into a bathroom stall to see the biggest turd I've ever seen. Like, seriously, it was the size of a mango or large russet potato. Vaguely football-shaped too, just like the record-breaking turd from South Park. I can only imagine the unholy hell whoever took that went through. It was bigger than the hole in the toilet. Zero chance you could flush it. Had to be 15 Keurig. Dude got stabbed in the forehead with a screwdriver. Did not penetrate the skull, cause that's literal armor. And also 6th graders don't have a ton of arm strength, but it sliced across his forehead from center to hairline, left to right. That was a lot of blood. I went to a Christian school. We had a middle-aged principal who was in his first year of employment at the school. One day at an assembly with all the students, he was trying to explain to us how bad it was when Jesus got whipped. He asked a computer teacher to come join him up front to help out his demonstration. He began to take his belt off and handed it to the computer teacher. He then got down on his hands and knees and pulled his shirt up. He said, "Mr. X is going to whip me." The look on the computer teacher's face was like a deer in the headlights. He was just as surprised as we were. The principal had to ask him multiple times to please swing the belt. He finally swung it, but very lightly. He was asked to swing the belt again, and so he did. Neither of the swings had anything behind it because the poor guy had no intention of hurting anybody that day. We were all in shock at what we had just witnessed. That principal didn't last past the year. I was watching a fight in the halls of my high school years ago. It was right outside the counselor's office. The kids were going at it. No idea what the fight was about. The door to the counselor's office opens and one of the kids in the fight, Jay, looked at the door to see if there was a teacher coming. As he did, the other kid who was fighting with, Adam, took one big step back and full-on haymakered Jay in the nose. After the fist connected, Jay's head reeled back and slammed into concrete cinder block wall, and he collapsed. I saw a guy pick a fight with another guy who I later found out was a state champion boxer. Dude A threw several punches, which Dude B easily dodged. When it became clear Dude A wasn't going to stop, Dude B threw one right hook. I saw teeth and blood fly, and Dude A hit the deck immediately, obviously unconscious. Dude B then backed away with his hands over his head to show he didn't intend to do anything more. One punch, man. That's all it takes. From where I am, there is this type of sphere-shaped firecrackers that are quite dangerous. It could split your hand if you don't throw it before it explodes. It is illegal to be sold, but it is not super enforced. High school kids can easily buy this if they know where to look. In my high school, there were this group of kids that got expelled for something they did, sniffing glue in school facilities if I'm not mistaken. A couple of days after they were expelled, they all sneak into school during morning assembly and start throwing a bunch of these firecrackers towards everyone. It's not that gruesome, and luckily nobody was injured, but it's freaking chaotic. You could see everybody's panicking, even the teachers. My elementary school used to be a high school. We had a big-ass football field next to the paved playground, with concrete ramps going down to the field, dropping probably 12 feet in front start to finish, and about 40 feet long. Up top, the playground had a little ledge to prevent you from falling down to the ramp, but kids would sit on it because it was perfect kid seat height. I'm sure you know where this is going. There was a spot on the playground where kids could fall backwards 12 feet down onto concrete. That's exactly what happened. A kid was standing next to that ledge, and a bigger kid thought it would be funny to throw a football at him really hard. The kid predictably fell backwards when he was hit by it and landed on his head. We could literally see his broken skull, possibly bits of what was inside. The pool of blood slowly expanding around his tiny body. I'll never forget it. Shockingly, the kid survived. He wasn't quite the same after that, traumatic brain injury and all, but he was a 2nd grader. Good chance he'd grow out of it, or at least I hope he did. The 4th grader who threw the ball at him was expelled. It wasn't the first time he'd hurt a little kid. Shit. Middle school locker room. A kid said something, I said something back, joking. They took a swing, so I dodged, and they ended up punching the locker, which was steel, that had those square-shaped punched out of them to make a grate. They lost the skin off a few knuckles. I got a nice view of bone and cartilage, then blood. I felt pretty bad for them. Ouch. 2 seniors took the blower-type hand dryers in the men's room and turned the nozzle 180 degrees so it pointed straight up. They then placed a turd into the flow nozzle, baking it with hot air and filling the whole first floor with the smell of a baking dookie. I later found out it took them 8 or 9 minutes of holding their breath and running back into the bathroom to run the blower again, since they only run about 20-ish seconds. Ever hear of stink bombs?
I have a lot of questions about this prank. I mean, first of all, was it just one poop or was it one of each of their poops? And do you think that was worth it? And do you realize there's a lot of other ways to make a hallway smell bad? I don't know. Big F right there.
When I was in high school, I remember kids playing basketball in the gym during lunch. One kid was going in for a layup and he got tripped. He basically did a forward roll right into the corner of a concrete wall by an exit door, hit head first. As he laid there in a pool of blood from the head wound he received, the staff on duty to watch the gym placed a thin blanket over him, like over his face and all. We thought we witnessed him die. He turned out to be fine. A friend in high school befriended a new kid from out of state. The new kid got her hooked on meth, and she was paying him for it with sex. Her brother, 2 years older, found out and went to confront them at lunch. He caught them having sex at lunch in the car. I've never seen anyone get dragged out of a car and beaten so bad. The female security guard just screamed, "You're on school property, you're going to go to jail." And dude dragged him into the street and kept beating him. Kinda wholesome, yeah.